Like much of Joplin, St. John's Hospital was ripped apart by the EF5 tornado that tore through the city on May 22, 2011. The windows smashed, equipment demolished, and power out. The building was ruined, and every patient died.
That's a security guard at St. John's Regional Medical Center. Inside the building, 183 patients. Nurses pulling people from their beds, doctors diving under desks. And outside, a mile-wide EF5 tornado bearing down on the hospital at 200 miles per hour. May 22, 2011. A Sunday afternoon in Joplin, Missouri. The high school graduation ceremony had just ended. Families were driving home, nurses were changing shifts, and a tornado was about to cut a 6-mile gash through the center of a city of 50,000 people, killing 158 of them in 38 minutes. It would become the deadliest single tornado in the United States in over 60 years. Joplin sits in the southwestern corner of Missouri, where the Ozark Plateau meets the flat prairies of Kansas and Oklahoma. Tornado country. Jasper County has recorded more tornadoes than any other county in the state since 1950. But almost all were weak, brief, rural EF0s and EF1s that touched down and lifted before most people looked up. That history bred dangerous familiarity. Sirens went off regularly. People heard them, glanced at the sky, and went about their day. Some residents told investigators they believed local topography made Joplin immune. It had been over 40 years since a tornado killed anyone there. Long enough to forget. May 22, 2011 was warm and muggy. Families gathered at Missouri Southern State University for the Joplin High School graduation. 455 seniors crossed the stage. The ceremony ended at 5:17 p.m. 24 minutes later, the tornado warning was issued. By midday on May 22nd, the Storm Prediction Center had flagged the region. A powerful upper-level trough was dragging a cold front southeast across the plains. Ahead of it, warm Gulf moisture pooled across the Ozarks. The instability was extreme. Cape values, a measure of the energy available for thunderstorms, exceeded 4,000 joules per kilogram, the atmospheric equivalent of a loaded spring. Wind shear provided the second ingredient. Surface winds blew from the south, while winds aloft screamed from the west. That difference in speed and direction at different altitudes is what makes a thunderstorm rotate, tilting the updraft and spinning it into a supercell. The third ingredient was the cap, a layer of warm air aloft acting like a lid on a boiling pot. All afternoon it held, trapping energy below. And when it finally broke, everything detonated at once. By 5 p.m., a supercell had exploded west of Joplin. It was moving east, and it was rotating. 5:34 p.m. Central Daylight Time. The tornado touched down just west of Joplin, near the intersection of JJ Highway and West 32nd Street. It was already wide. Within minutes, it reached nearly a mile across. Sirens sounded at 5:38 p.m., giving residents a 17-minute lead time before the worst of the damage. But here was the problem. Joplin's sirens had gone off earlier that afternoon for a storm that produced nothing. They went off, went silent, then went off again. Some residents heard the second round of sirens and assumed the threat had passed. Others thought the sirens meant all clear. The confusion was fatal. The tornado entered the southern edge of the city, crossing residential neighborhoods at roughly 200 miles per hour. It was not slowing down. It was not turning. It was heading directly into the most densely populated part of its path. 5:40 p.m. The tornado crosses 20th Street. Entire blocks of homes are swept from foundations. Cars are lifted and rolled into unrecognizable shapes. Concrete parking barriers, 200 to 300 pounds each, anchored into asphalt with rebar, are plucked from the ground and thrown 60 yards. 5:42 p.m. St. John's Regional Medical Center takes a direct hit. Every window in the 9-story building shatters simultaneously. The top 2 floors are torn from the structure. Inside, debris, chairs, X-ray machines, glass, is launched through hallways at lethal speed. The hospital's backup generators sit outside the building. An air filtration unit ripped from the roof is hurled directly onto them. The power dies. 5 patients on mechanical ventilators lose oxygen. There is no backup to the backup. 5:45 p.m. Greenbrier Nursing Home. The roof detaches. The walls collapse. 21 residents are killed. 5:47 p.m. Joplin High School is flattened. But nobody is inside. Graduation ended 30 minutes earlier, 3 miles north. 30 minutes. That is the margin.
Will Norton, 18, had just graduated from Joplin High School. He was driving home with his father, Mark, in the family's SUV. Will was a YouTube creator with over 2 million views on his channel, a filmmaker who'd been accepted to Chapman University to study film production. As they drove south on Rangeline Road, the tornado overtook them. The winds punched through the sunroof. Will's father grabbed his son's legs. It wasn't enough. Will was pulled through the roof and into the storm. Mark held on as long as he could. His son was gone. Dean Wells, 59, was working his shift at Home Depot. An Army veteran and master electrician from Webb City, Wells had worked at the store for over 5 years. He was also a whistler. He'd recorded 2 CDs of whistled hymns and performed at local hospitals and nursing homes. The next day would have been his and his wife Sue's 42nd wedding anniversary. When the tornado approached, Wells guided an estimated 40 to 50 customers and employees toward the back of the building for cover. One of the store's prefabricated concrete walls collapsed outward. 30 people behind it survived. Another wall collapsed inward. Dean Wells was beneath it. Dr. Kevin Kikta, an emergency physician from New Jersey on a locum tenens shift at St. John's, had never been in a tornado. When Code Gray was called, he ran with a pregnant nurse named Shiloh Cook into a small, windowless office. They crouched under a desk. 45 seconds later, the hospital was unrecognizable. His car had vanished, blown away, never recovered. Christopher Don Lucas, 27, was a former Navy submariner and father of 2. His fiancée was pregnant with their 3rd child. Lucas managed a Pizza Hut on the tornado's path. When he saw the storm approaching, he rushed every employee and at least a dozen customers into the restaurant's walk-in freezer. He grabbed a bungee cord and held the freezer door shut with everything he had. His coworker, Daniel Fluharty, grabbed Lucas by the waist. They held together as the building was ripped apart around them. Darian Vanderhoofen, 44, had spent years wishing for a child. Her son Joshua was born on March 28, 2010. He was 14 months old. He had just started walking. Darian worked as the Joplin regional manager for the Heartland Lion's Eye Bank. She encouraged everyone she knew to become an organ donor. Her obituary would later note that she had wished to donate herself, but the circumstances of her death prevented it. Joshua Wolford, 27, his pregnant girlfriend, and their 2 toddlers fled their trailer when they saw the tornado coming. They ran to a nearby Walmart.
Inside, a shelf of toys partially collapsed, forming a tent over them as they crouched on the floor. 15 minutes later, they crawled out, alive. The tornado tracked east through southern Joplin for 6 miles. In its wake, a landscape that looked like a war zone. Steel trusses from commercial buildings were rolled up like sheets of paper. Vehicles, heavy buses, tractor trailers, were picked up and carried hundreds of yards. Some were compacted into unrecognizable spheres of bent metal. At the Home Depot, the entire structure collapsed. Homes weren't just damaged, they were erased. Foundations scoured clean. Concrete porches ripped away. Trees debarked and snapped. The tornado also churned up something hidden beneath the surface. Joplin had been a lead mining town for decades. The storm ripped up foundations, uprooted trees, and turned over contaminated soil that had sat quietly for generations. Chunks of raw lead ore the size of golf balls were scattered across 40% of yards in southern Joplin. Will Norton, 18, filmmaker, dreamer. His body was found 5 days later in a pond. His father still visits his room, where a pack of chewing gum sits open on the desk, and his mismatched socks remain where he left them. Joplin later named a baseball park for children with special needs in his memory. Will Norton, Miracle Field. Dean Wells, 59, the man who whistled hymns and saved strangers. President Obama named him by name at the Joplin Memorial Service 1 week later. In the face of winds that showed no mercy, the president said, it was ordinary people, swiftly tested, who said, I'm willing to die right now so that someone else might live. Darian Vanderhoofen, 44, and her son Joshua, 14 months. The mother who waited years to become one. The boy who had just learned to walk. Christopher Don Lucas, 27. He held a freezer door shut so that others could live. The people inside survived. Cheryl Nelson, 34. She was working the AT&T store when the tornado struck. Her obituary says she helped a family escape moments before the building was hit. She did not escape herself. At Greenbrier Nursing Home, 21 residents were killed, including Edmund Mullaney, 82, a Marine Corps veteran. At St. John's Hospital, 5 patients suffocated when the generators failed. A 6th victim was a visitor. 158 people died. More than 1,150 were injured. Over a third of the dead were 65 or older. 13 were children. The Joplin tornado was on the ground for 38 minutes, carving a path 21.6 miles long and nearly a mile wide. Winds exceeded 200 miles per hour. It destroyed over 4,000 homes and damaged nearly 8,000 buildings. Over 15,000 vehicles were destroyed. Total damage? $2.8 billion, the costliest tornado in American history at the time. It was the deadliest single tornado in the United States since 1947, the 7th deadliest on record, the first EF5 to strike Missouri since 1957. Within 45 minutes of the tornado lifting, the Red Cross opened a shelter at Missouri Southern State University, the same campus where graduation had been held an hour earlier. Within a week, a 60-bed field hospital was operating where St. John's once stood. In the weeks that followed, 1,300 people were listed as missing. Most were eventually located, but for days, the number hung over the city like a second storm. The National Institute of Standards and Technology launched a formal investigation. Only the 3rd time NIST had investigated a natural disaster. Their findings changed the country. The team identified catastrophic failures in emergency communications and building performance. None of the buildings destroyed in Joplin had been designed to withstand tornado-force winds. At the time, tornadoes were one of the few natural hazards not addressed in U.S. building codes. NIST's recommendations led to updated national standards for emergency communications and new building codes accounting for tornadoes, including safe room requirements for schools, hospitals, and nursing homes. The new Mercy Hospital Joplin was built 3 miles from the original site and engineered to withstand winds up to 250 miles per hour. Its generators are now housed inside the structure. Joplin High School was rebuilt. 95% of students returned. But in the year after the tornado, 18 people in Joplin died by suicide. Domestic violence calls increased. A 2024 study found that 41% of residents were directly impacted, with widespread depression and post-traumatic stress that researchers called tornado brain. Every May, the same ingredients gather over the same ground: Gulf moisture, a cold front, an unstable atmosphere capped all afternoon, storing energy, waiting. The people of Joplin know what those ingredients mean now. They no longer assume it can't happen here. The question, the one every city in tornado country should be asking, is whether they're ready when it does. Thank you for watching. If you're new here, welcome. If you've been here before, thank you for coming back. If this story stayed with you, consider subscribing, leaving a like, or sharing it with someone. These stories take time to research, write, and edit, and your support is what keeps them going. Every storm eventually ends, but the way we hold each other, that remains. Take care of one another. Stay alert, and I'll see you in the next one.